I always believed that relationships are meant for those who are emotionally mature. Growing up, I watched my parents navigate their ups and downs with grace, teaching me that love is about loyalty, support, and mutual understanding. I dreamed of finding a woman who embodied those qualities, a loyal partner who would stand by me through thick and thin. As I entered adulthood, I often found myself reflecting on the type of relationship I wanted. I longed for a love that would last until the end of my days, filled with joy and companionship. But deep down, I harbored a fear that gnawed at me. What if my partner wasn't as committed as I was? What if I poured my heart into someone who could walk away without a second thought? This fear shaped my view of relationships and made me question everything. I often wondered if I was just chasing a dream. Was true love even real? I felt a mix of empathy for those who had been hurt and a longing for justice against those who broke hearts. As I built my life, I hoped to find the kind of love that would not only bring happiness but also validate my beliefs about loyalty and maturity. But then I met Emily. She seemed like everything I had ever wanted. Her laughter filled the spaces around us, and her warmth made me feel like I was finally home. Yet beneath that exterior, there were signs I chose to ignore. I wanted to believe that we were destined for happiness, and I pushed aside any doubts. After all, this was the love I had always dreamed of. How could it be anything less? The moment I knew things were changing between Emily and me was the day I mustered the courage to talk to her about our relationship. My heart raced as I sat across from her, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. I wanted to express my feelings, to lay bare the struggles we faced, but I was terrified of her reaction. "Emily, we need to talk," I began, my voice trembling. She looked up, her eyes widening slightly, and I could see a flicker of fear in them. It was a moment that felt both ordinary and monumental, as if the world had paused to listen. I poured my heart out, sharing my feelings of frustration and disappointment. I spoke about how every conflict felt like a storm, how I often felt I was talking to a wall when I needed her to engage. I wanted to understand why she would shut down or lash out instead of having a real conversation. I wanted us to be partners, but it felt like we were stuck in a cycle of hurt and misunderstanding. To my surprise, Emily's initial response was defensive. She dismissed my feelings, insisting that I was overreacting and that everything was fine. But I knew it wasn't. I could feel the distance growing between us, and the more I tried to bridge that gap, the wider it seemed to become. As I watched her react, I felt a pang of heartbreak. This wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with. The Emily I knew was kind and understanding, but in that moment, all I could see was a person unwilling to confront the truth. I longed for her to see my perspective, to acknowledge the struggles we faced together, but instead, we fell into an argument that spiraled out of control. By the end of our conversation, I felt defeated. I had hoped for clarity, but instead, I was left with a heavy heart. It became painfully clear that I was fighting for something that felt increasingly out of reach. This was more than just a disagreement. It was the beginning of a realization that would change everything. It was hard to accept that I was starting to hear the truth about my relationship from someone other than Emily. A close friend, someone I trusted, casually mentioned their concerns about our dynamic. "Jake, have you ever thought that maybe Emily isn't as invested as you are?" Their words struck me like a bolt of lightning, igniting a whirlwind of emotions I had tried so hard to suppress. At first, I brushed it off, insisting to myself that my friend was mistaken. I couldn't bear the thought that the woman I loved could be anything less than fully committed. But deep down, a seed of doubt took root, and I began to replay our interactions in my mind. The more I reflected, the more I realized that there were signs I had chosen to overlook. Her reluctance to engage in serious conversations, her tendency to retreat into herself during conflicts. I felt a storm brewing within me, battling my desire to defend Emily against this new perspective and my growing unease about our relationship. The conflict was exhausting. I wanted to trust her, to believe that we could work through our issues together, but the doubt lingered like a shadow, casting a pall over every interaction. It wasn't just the words of my friend that haunted me, it was the implications. I found myself questioning everything. Had I been fooling myself? Had I ignored the signs of her emotional immaturity because I wanted to believe so badly in our love? The ongoing tension felt suffocating, and each time I looked at Emily, the weight of my concerns threatened to overwhelm me. In those quiet moments together, I struggled to connect. I wanted to reach out, to voice my fears, but the words felt lodged in my throat. What if I was wrong? What if my friend was misreading the situation? My heart was torn between wanting to protect my feelings and the nagging urge to confront the truth head-on. The thought of losing her was terrifying, yet the idea of staying in a relationship built on illusions was even scarier. I began to realize that if I couldn't accept the truth, I was only prolonging the inevitable. And so, I wrestled with my emotions, caught in a battle between love and reality. As the reality of my situation settled in, I found myself grappling with a deepening sense of inadequacy. I had always prided myself on being emotionally mature, believing that I could handle challenges in relationships with grace. But with every passing day, I felt my self-esteem eroding, and it was a painful realization. I began to question everything about myself. Was I not good enough for Emily? Had I somehow failed as a partner? The confidence I once held crumbled under the weight of doubt and insecurity. I'd catch glimpses of myself in the mirror, and instead of seeing a man with dreams and aspirations, I saw someone who had let love slip away. The feeling was suffocating, and I found it hard to breathe. Every time Emily and I had an argument or she retreated into silence, it felt like a blow to my self-worth. I would replay our conversations in my head, searching for signs of my own shortcomings. Was I too demanding? Did I expect too much from her? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow to blame for our growing disconnect. The emotional turmoil manifested in other areas of my life. I became withdrawn from friends, hesitant to share my struggles. I felt like a burden, afraid to reveal the cracks in my facade. I'd scroll through social media, watching others share moments of joy and love, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. Their relationships seemed effortless, while mine felt like a constant uphill battle. Yet, amid the chaos of my thoughts, I knew I had to confront these feelings. I couldn't let this relationship define my worth. It was hard to remember that self-esteem should come from within and not be reliant on someone else's actions or feelings. I started to seek out small moments of joy, things that reminded me of my strengths and passions. I began journaling my thoughts, documenting my journey through heartache. It was a way to externalize the pain I felt inside. Slowly, I started to reclaim my narrative, reminding myself of the qualities that made me who I was. It was a long road ahead, but I realized that I had to rebuild my self-esteem, regardless of how my relationship with Emily unfolded. The day I finally decided to break things off with Emily felt like a dark cloud hanging over me. I had anticipated this moment, but nothing could prepare me for the emotional turmoil that surged within. As I sat alone, grappling with the decision, waves of sadness washed over me, leaving me feeling utterly lost. It was heartbreaking to acknowledge that the love we once shared had transformed into something heavy and burdensome. I replayed our memories in my mind, the laughter, the shared dreams, the moments of tenderness. But those recollections were now overshadowed by the reality of our struggles. Each happy memory felt like a dagger, reminding me of what we had lost and what could never be again. When I finally confronted Emily, I saw the confusion in her eyes, the disbelief that this was happening. I felt her pain, and it cut me deep. I wanted to hold on to the love we had, but I knew that staying would only lead to more heartbreak. It was a painful paradox. I loved her, yet I was also suffocating in a relationship that no longer felt healthy. The moment I uttered the words, "I think it's best if we go our separate ways," I felt a mix of relief and anguish. Her eyes welled with tears, and it broke my heart to see her in such pain. I wanted to comfort her, to take back my words, but I also knew that this was the only way for both of us to grow. I walked away, feeling like a part of me was being torn apart, leaving behind someone I cared about deeply. In the days that followed, I was engulfed in emotional turmoil. I had lost not only my partner, but also my vision of a future I had imagined with her. Nights turned into sleepless hours filled with thoughts of what could have been. I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation, as if the world around me continued to move while I was stuck in a fog of grief. Every little thing reminded me of her, the songs we used to listen to, the places we frequented. It was as if every corner of my life echoed with memories of Emily. Yet, deep down, I knew that I had to allow myself to feel this pain. It was a necessary step in the healing process. I slowly began to understand that heartbreak was a testament to the love I had once shared. It was a reminder that I was capable of deep emotions and meaningful connections, even if they didn't last. The decision to leave Emily didn't come easily. It was the culmination of countless sleepless nights and heavy heartbeats. I wrestled with my thoughts, trying to balance the love I felt for her with the reality of our situation. Every time I thought about the future, I saw a dark cloud overshadowing what should have been bright and hopeful. I found myself standing at a crossroads, questioning if I was making the right choice. I replayed our conversations, the times we fought, and the moments of silence that followed. I realized I was no longer just her partner. I was a caretaker of her emotions, trying to soothe her pain instead of sharing my own. It felt like I was drowning, and the weight of our relationship was pulling me under. It struck me that I couldn't save Emily if she wasn't willing to save herself. I longed for a partnership based on mutual support and understanding, yet our interactions often felt like an uphill battle. I began to understand that staying in this relationship meant sacrificing my own happiness and emotional health. One evening, I found myself staring at the moon, lost in thought. It illuminated my surroundings, casting a soft glow that reminded me of the clarity I was seeking. I realized that I had to prioritize my well-being. I needed to step away, not just for my sake, but for Emily's too. She deserved someone who could fully engage with her, someone who could handle her emotional storms with grace, while I felt increasingly ill-equipped to do so. With a heavy heart, I made the decision to walk away. I thought of all the dreams I had woven with Emily, traveling, growing old together, building a life. But now, Those dreams felt like distant echoes. I knew that ending things would be painful, but the thought of remaining in a relationship that felt more like a burden was even more distressing. The next day, as I prepared to speak to her, my stomach churned with anxiety. I wanted to be kind, to express my feelings honestly without causing more hurt. But I also knew that honesty would hurt. I steeled myself for the conversation ahead, determined to face the truth no matter how difficult it was. In that moment, I understood that love sometimes meant letting go. It wasn't just about ending a chapter, it was about allowing both of us the opportunity to grow. I hoped that in time, Emily would find the strength to navigate her own emotional landscape, just as I was learning to navigate mine. After I made the decision to leave Emily, I felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness. The weight of the breakup hung heavy on my shoulders, and I knew I couldn't carry it alone. I needed to reach out to my friends and family to seek the support that had always been there for me in times of need. I remember sitting down with my best friend, Mark, at our favorite cafe. The familiar smell of coffee and the warmth of the sun streaming through the window felt comforting, but I couldn't shake the heaviness in my heart. As I shared the details of my relationship and the reasons behind my decision, I felt vulnerable, exposing parts of myself that I had kept hidden for so long. Mark listened intently, nodding as I poured out my frustrations and fears. He had always been the kind of friend who offered a steady presence, and his understanding made it easier to confront my emotions. "You did what you had to do, Jake," he said gently. "Sometimes, letting go is the bravest thing you can do for yourself and the other person." Hearing those words felt like a balm for my wounded heart. I realized that I wasn't alone in this. I had people who cared about me and were willing to support my journey toward healing. With every story I shared, I felt the burden start to lift, piece by piece. It was a reminder that friendships can provide a lifeline, especially in moments of despair. I also reached out to my family, seeking their perspective on the situation. My sister, who had been through her own share of heartache, offered valuable insight. "It's okay to feel sad, Jake. Just remember that this doesn't define you," she said. "You're allowed to grieve the loss of what you hoped for, but you also need to find a way to move forward." Her words resonated with me, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I understood that seeking support wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a crucial step in my healing process. I allowed myself to lean on my loved ones, to share my fears and uncertainties. As the weeks passed, I found solace in their company. We went on hikes, shared meals, and spent hours talking about life, love, and everything in between. With each interaction, I felt a renewed sense of strength. I learned to embrace vulnerability as a part of my journey, understanding that it was okay to lean on others when the weight felt too heavy to bear alone. In those moments of connection, I began to rediscover the person I had lost in the tumult of my relationship. I laughed, I cried, and I allowed myself to feel the full spectrum of my emotions. And slowly but surely, I started to heal. As I started to lean on my friends and family, I began to discover a wellspring of strength within myself that I never knew existed. It was as if the act of sharing my struggles had ignited a spark of resilience. I realized that healing wasn't just about moving on from my relationship with Emily. It was about rediscovering who I was and what truly mattered to me. I set small goals for myself, seeking to reclaim my identity outside of the relationship. I picked up old hobbies that I had set aside: painting, hiking, and even writing. Each brushstroke, each step on the trail felt like a step toward reclaiming my joy. I started journaling my thoughts and feelings, pouring my heart onto the pages. It became a safe space where I could explore my emotions without fear of judgment. There were days when the pain felt overwhelming, but I found strength in the process. I began to understand that healing wasn't linear. It had its ups and downs. I allowed myself to feel the sadness when it came, but I also made a conscious effort to seek out moments of joy. I surrounded myself with positive influences and engaged in activities that lifted my spirits. I also took the time to reflect on what I truly wanted in my life moving forward. I realized that I had spent so long trying to navigate Emily's emotional landscape that I had neglected my own. It was time to prioritize my needs and desires. I began envisioning a future where I could be with someone who matched my emotional maturity, someone who could engage in healthy communication and navigate conflicts with grace. With each passing day, I felt a little lighter. I started to recognize the lessons hidden within my heartbreak. I understood that I had grown through the experience, gaining a deeper understanding of myself and what I needed from a partner. I learned to embrace my emotions without shame, recognizing that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a strength. As I began to heal, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I started to focus on my personal growth, setting ambitious goals for my career and exploring new avenues for self-improvement. The future didn't seem as daunting anymore. It was filled with possibilities. I knew that the journey ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I was ready to face it head-on. In that journey of self-discovery, I found the courage to let go of the past and embrace the present. I was no longer defined by my relationship with Emily. I was becoming the person I was always meant to be. As I continued to heal and rediscover myself, I found that life had a way of surprising me when I least expected it. I was attending a local art exhibition, something I had started doing to explore my creative side, when I met Sarah. She was standing in front of a vibrant painting, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. We struck up a conversation, and I was immediately drawn to her warmth and enthusiasm. As we chatted, I realized that Sarah had a genuine passion for art and a depth of understanding that resonated with me. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and for the first time in a long while, and it felt like a breath of fresh air after the weight of my previous relationship. In the days that followed, we exchanged numbers and began to explore our shared interests. Sarah had a refreshing perspective on life, and her emotional maturity was evident in the way she communicated. I found myself opening up to her about my past, about the struggles I had faced with Emily. To my surprise, Sarah listened without judgment and offered support without feeling overwhelming. As our connection deepened, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. I had been hesitant to jump into another relationship, still carrying the scars from my breakup, but with Sarah, it felt different. She encouraged me to be open and vulnerable, allowing me to express my fears about trust and commitment. It was a refreshing change to be with someone who understood the importance of communication. Gradually, I learned to let down my guard. I realized that while my past experiences had shaped me, they didn't have to dictate my future. Sarah and I shared moments of laughter, late-night conversations, and quiet walks under the stars. Yet rebuilding trust was a gradual process. I sometimes found myself grappling with lingering doubts, afraid of getting hurt again. But instead of shutting down, I chose to communicate my feelings with Sarah. I shared my fears of vulnerability, and she responded with kindness and understanding. It was a new kind of intimacy, one built on mutual respect and honesty. With Sarah, I learned that love could be an exploration rather than a burden. We took our time, savoring each moment and allowing our relationship to unfold naturally. It felt liberating to be with someone who appreciated me for who I was, someone who encouraged my growth while also nurturing her own. As I embraced this new chapter in my life, I felt a sense of renewal. I was no longer defined by my past, but empowered by the lessons I had learned. I was ready to open my heart again, knowing that while there might be challenges ahead, the potential for love and happiness was worth the risk. As my relationship with Sarah blossomed, I found myself experiencing a joy I hadn't felt in a long time. Each day with her was like a new adventure, filled with laughter and shared dreams. We explored new places together, trying out cozy cafes and hiking trails that took our breath away. With Sarah, it felt like I was rediscovering the world, and it was exhilarating. One evening, as we sat under the stars, I turned to her, and something inside me clicked. I realized I was no longer haunted by the memories of my past. Instead, I was embracing the present with an open heart. Sarah's laughter filled the air, and I found myself captivated by the way she spoke about her dreams and aspirations. She had a contagious enthusiasm for life that drew me in, and I couldn't help but admire her strength. I started to understand that new love doesn't erase the past, it simply transforms it. My experiences with Emily had taught me valuable lessons about emotional maturity and the importance of communication. I approached my relationship with Sarah with newfound wisdom, cherishing the moments we shared and actively participating in building something beautiful together. With Sarah, I felt safe to be myself. I could express my thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. There was an ease to our conversations, a comfort that allowed us both to be vulnerable. I found myself sharing dreams I hadn't dared to voice in years, envisioning a future filled with possibility and love. The happiness we cultivated together became a source of strength. I no longer felt burdened by the shadows of my past. Instead, I was inspired to grow alongside someone who genuinely cared for me. Sarah encouraged me to chase my passions and reminded me that life was meant to be celebrated. Her support fueled my motivation, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose in everything I did. As I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment, I realized that I had come full circle. The heartbreak I once feared had led me to a place of understanding and growth. I had learned that love is not just about finding the right person, it's about being the right partner too. With Sarah, I felt a deep connection, a partnership rooted in trust, respect, and mutual growth. Together, we navigated life's challenges, celebrating each small victory along the way. I began to believe that love could indeed be a source of strength rather than a burden. In Sarah, I found not just a partner, but a true companion. With her by my side, I was ready to embrace whatever the future held, knowing that together we could build something extraordinary. As I reflect on the journey that brought me here, I can't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. The heartache I experienced with Emily, while painful, became a catalyst for growth and transformation. I learned that life has a way of steering us toward the right path, even when the way seems unclear. With Sarah, I embraced a new beginning, filled with hope and love. We had built a relationship based on trust, communication, and emotional maturity. The laughter we shared and the quiet moments of understanding created a foundation that felt unshakable. It was a beautiful contrast to the turmoil I had known before, and it filled my heart with warmth. As the seasons changed, So did our relationship. We talked about our dreams for the future, traveling to new places, exploring new hobbies together, and perhaps even building a life as partners. The thought of sharing my life with someone who truly understood me was exhilarating. I no longer felt trapped by the shadows of my past. I was stepping into the light. I also took time to honor my journey. I recognize that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means integrating the lessons learned into my life. I carried the wisdom gained from my experiences with me, using it to navigate my relationship with Sarah. I was more open, more communicative, and more willing to engage in difficult conversations. I also reached out to Emily, not to rekindle our past, but to find closure. We met for coffee one afternoon, and I could see the growth in her as well. We talked about the lessons we had learned, the paths we were on, and how we both were moving forward. It was a bittersweet moment, but it felt necessary. I wished her well, and in doing so, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Looking ahead, I felt an overwhelming sense of excitement. I had emerged from the shadows of heartbreak, ready to embrace the unknown. I understood that life would continue to present its challenges, but I was no longer afraid. I had discovered a resilience within myself that I hadn't known existed, and I was eager to face whatever came next. With Sarah by my side, I knew that I could approach life's ups and downs with confidence. We would support each other through thick and thin, navigating the complexities of life together. The lessons of love, loss, and healing had prepared me for this moment, and I felt ready for whatever the future held. As I stepped into this new chapter, I did so with an open heart, ready to embrace the beauty of love and the promise of new beginnings. I realized that every ending is simply the start of something new, and I was ready to write the next chapter of my life, one filled with love, happiness, and endless possibilities.